Welcome once again to the Gain Nigeria quarterly knowledge sharing session, and we are happy to have you on our maiden edition of the knowledge sharing session. And I'll be handing over shortly to my colleague Joyce Apata to give us a brief introduction into what the learning session looks like, what we should be expecting, and I'll hand over right now to Joyce. Joyce, over to you.
Thank you very much, Miracle, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural Gain Knowledge Sharing session, and thank you for taking out time to join us. Today, it's less about a single conversation and more about the beginning of a platform that we hope will grow into a space for honest dialogue, shared learning, and most importantly, new thinking. If there's one thing that we all recognize is that transforming food systems is not a simple or a linear task. It requires us to constantly question assumptions, to connect ideas across sectors, and engage with evidence in a way that challenges how we think and indeed how we act. And that kind of transformation, you agree with me, cannot happen in isolation. It has to be through deliberate and ongoing intellectual exchange. And this is exactly what this series is designed to do. We want to be able to create a space where practitioners, policymakers, researchers, and indeed private sector can come together, not just to present, but to also interrogate ideas. A space where we can move beyond the peripheral or surface level discussions and engage more deeply with what is working, what is not working, what changes do we need to see or make, because sometimes the most powerful shifts begin with better questions. So why are certain interventions not delivering the outcomes that we expect? What are we overlooking in the way we design policies or programs? How do we bridge the gap between evidence and action? These are the kind of conversations we hope to stimulate. Um, at Gain, we see this as part of our role, and we see ourselves not just as implementers of programs, but an organization that convenes, that connects, and contributes to thought leadership in a way that will drive real change. And I believe that if we consistently, bring the right people into the room, share insights openly, and challenge each other constructively, then we'll begin to shape more responsive and inclusive and ultimately more effective food systems. So we are committed to supporting an ecosystem where evidence informs policy, where dialogue would shape practice, and where collaboration drives impact. So this is an invitation to engage, to contribute, and to co-create this platform with us. Like Miracle said, it's our maiden outing, so this is the very first. And we want this to be a space that reflects the richness of perspectives across the sector, and one that evolves with each session. So as we begin today's series, I want to encourage us to engage with openness and curiosity. Let us use this space not just to listen, but to think together, question constructively, and most importantly, contribute. I believe that if we do this continuously, these conversations would become a quiet but a very powerful force that would shape how we design interventions, shape how we influence policies, and ultimately also transform the food system. So thank you once again for being here, and thank you for being part of this journey with us. I look forward to the conversations ahead. Back to you, Miracle.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for that wonderful introduction. I will get started right away to introduce our keynote speaker. I'll hand over to Glory Solomon to make the introduction. Over to you, Glory.
Thank you so much, Miracle. Before we begin, I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker for today's session. We're diving into the cost and affordability of healthy diets in Nigeria, and we are privileged to have an expert who's been deeply involved in research, policy, and practical solutions in this space. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Olutayo Adeyemi. Let's give her a virtual round of applause, everyone. I can't see the hands. Thank you so much. So Dr. Tayo is a public health nutritionist and food systems researcher working at the intersection of data, policy, and practice to improve access to healthy diets in Nigeria. She's currently an agriculture, nutrition, and health academic science policy fellow, advancing the use of evidence to inform food systems policy and strengthen diet affordability. Her work includes contributions to national and global initiatives such as the Nigeria Food Systems Dashboard and the institutionalization of cost of healthy diets monitoring. She's also an associate lecturer at the University of Ibadan and holds a PhD in nutritional sciences from Cornell University. Just before I hand over to her, we're going to play a short explainer video on the cost of healthy diets. The video will offer key background on the subject and set the context for today's presentation. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Kindly give it your full attention.
The cost of a healthy diet, or COHD, is the cost of the cheapest possible combination of foods that meets healthy diet guidelines, given market prices of locally available foods. It helps governments see if people can both physically access and economically afford a healthy diet. It looks at the least amount of money an adult would need each day, not counting things like transportation or cooking costs. These indicators are being watched by the United Nations and the World Bank worldwide to get a better idea of how easy it is for people to access good food. In Nigeria, the National Bureau of Statistics, with support from the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, GAIN, and the Food Prices for Nutrition Project, based at Tufts University in Boston, USA, has adopted this indicator to help the Nigerian government monitor improved economic access to healthy food and track progress towards global goals for food security, nutrition, and health. To measure this indicator, the NBS collects some important information. This includes retail prices of food items at stores, details about food composition, and a standard for what makes a healthy diet. The National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria collects food prices every month from different sources across the country for the computation of the monthly inflation rate. From this information, the NBS checks prices and details of over 200 types of food. About 150 of these are then considered to figure out the cost of a healthy diet. The 150 items used to compute the COHD indicator in Nigeria is based on something called the Healthy Diet Basket. The Healthy Diet Basket is like a set of rules that makes it possible to compare the cost of healthy diets across different countries, especially in places that don't have their own specific diet guidelines like Nigeria. So, why is it important to track the cost of a healthy diet? The COHD indicator helps governments and policymakers make important decisions about policies and programs regarding the accessibility and affordability of a healthy diet. For example, the COHD provides information on how much money families need to afford a healthy diet. This information helps governments make policy decisions on support and interventions for citizens who need extra help, and also targets specific groups of people for help. With information from this indicator, government and policymakers can also draft policies on which foods to focus on producing and trading. This indicator is also useful for studying how food access is connected to other things in the food system. With the publication of this indicator, the government has more information to track and monitor progress towards achieving SDG Goal 2, ensuring we create a world and a country with zero hunger. To learn more about food systems as well as the Nigerian Subnational Food Systems Dashboard, please visit the Food Systems Dashboard at www.foodsystemsdashboard.org. To learn more about the COHD, please visit the MBS website at www.nigerianstat.gov.ng.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Tayo.
I really like to thank the GAIN Nigeria team for the opportunity to speak at this knowledge sharing session. It's a great pleasure to talk about because of healthy diets, especially what we've been doing in Nigeria. And so I would like to go straight ahead to share my screen. Okay. Yes, so first of all, before I start, I would like to really appreciate the food prizes for nutrition project at Tufts University. In addition to developing the methods I'll be speaking about today, the team has been very supportive in and helping us to analyze data, providing capacity building and other activities for us here in Nigeria. So I really like to thank them for all their many contributions. So today I'm going to be talking about first, I'll start with talking about the costs, the relevance of the cost and affordability of healthy diet indicators in general. And then I'll speak a little bit about the methods and point you to where you can find additional information about methods if you are interested in learning more. And then I'll present the evidence for Nigeria, what we've learned about the cost and affordability of healthy diets. And then touch a bit on the role of food systems and also a bit on policy actions to improve affordability of healthy diets. If you have a question at any time or you can't hear me, please feel free to drop a message in the chat box and yes, I'll respond to it as I go. Okay, so the big question, can Nigerians afford a healthy diet? What are your thoughts? I'm asking a question, like I really want people to at least drop a message in the chat box. Can Nigerians afford a healthy diet? I know that we have non-Nigerians on the call, but there is a substantial number of Nigerians. So you can share about your country. Can the people in your country afford a healthy diet? Okay, so some people say not particularly, some say yes, some say majority cannot afford it, some say not really. Someone says it depends on the pyramid. So some people say it depends. So we have three answers. Yes, it depends, no. And the truth is, if you asked the average nutritionist in Nigeria, they will say yes, that Nigerians can afford a healthy diet. And it is often perceived that people's diets are driven by knowledge or preferences, and that consuming a healthy diet doesn't cost a lot. And so it's either people don't know what constitutes a healthy diet, or they know and they prefer not to consume a healthy diet. And so in this image I have here, helped ChatGPT drew this for me. So you have on one hand a plate of noodles, instant noodles, and boiled egg with a bottle of a sugar-sweetened beverage. And the other hand, you have rice and beans with some vegetables, boiled egg, milk, and an apple. And you have this lady who is trying to decide between one or the other. So the typical news you hear in Nigeria is that malnutrition is the result of ignorance of the right combination of foods, as opposed to the availability of the food items or their costs. Working locally so many times in nutrition meetings, this is the common narrative. But is this statement really true? And that is what we'll be talking about today. We'll be answering this question and seeing where it is true, if it is true, and for whom it is true. And the reason why this question matters is that healthy diets are essential for ending malnutrition. Malnutrition remains a critical challenge in Nigeria as in other low and middle income countries. And for Nigeria in particular, 40% of children under 5 are stunted on one hand, but you have 25% of women who are overweight or obese. Micronutrient deficiencies also affect a significant proportion of the population. You have 47% of women and 58% of children under 5 who had anemia in 2024. And anemia is often considered to reflect micronutrient deficiencies because it occurs from deficiencies of several micronutrients. And at the center of all of this, we see that poor diet quality contributes to everything, all of these nutrition challenges. And in Nigeria, we also know, based on the data, that diets are very poor. So in 2024, just 22% of men and women, so all adults, and when you separate it, it's the same number, 22%, consumed all food groups recommended in food-based dietary guidelines. And when you look at the children 6 to 23 months old, it's even worse because in 2024, just 6% of them were being fed a minimum acceptable diet. When we talk about a healthy diet, in terms of definition, so healthy diets are defined by food-based dietary guidelines, and they're a realistic way for people to choose nutrient adequate diets. So I have a professor who will always say, nobody goes to the market to buy nutrients. Nobody goes to the market to say, oh, I want to buy some vitamin A or I want to buy some calcium. People buy food, and recommendations that are centered around nutrients really don't do a lot to help people have adequate diets. It's food-based dietary guidelines. And when we have quantitative food-based dietary guidelines, they tell us what food groups to consume and how much food to consume from each food group. But the truth is that healthy diets are more expensive to achieve than other kinds of diets. So if we consider diets, like different diet types, to be sort of like a ladder, at the very base, and this is an image from the Food Prices for Nutrition project. At the very base, you have an energy sufficient diet where people just consume enough calories to meet their needs for short-term subsistence. And that is about the cheapest diet you can get, the very cheapest, but it's not an adequate diet. It's just energy sufficient. We keep the person alive, essentially. Then at the next level, you have a nutrient adequate diet. And nutrient adequate diets avoid deficiencies and excesses of essential nutrients, but they may not necessarily meet food-based dietary guidelines. A classic example is if someone consumes a limited number of food groups, so maybe starchy staples and animal source foods, particularly if the starchy staples are fortified and the person doesn't consume any fruits or vegetables, the person, it's quite possible to to achieve nutrient intake that way. But when you talk about things like fiber and other components of a healthy diet, those things will be missing. But in terms of nutrients, it's possible to achieve a nutrient adequate diet even if you don't meet all food based dietary guidelines. And then you have the higher step, which is the healthy diets, the healthy diets that meets food group recommendations. So with the healthy diets basket, it's energy sufficient, it's nutrient adequate, but it also meets recommendations for other things, including reduction in the risk of non-communicable diseases. And then I'll just point out that all of these diets, this is at the very, you can have this diet at the very basic level without considering whether or not they meet your preferences for taste, for convenience, and for other things. So you can have a step at the top of the healthy diet, which is a healthy diet that meets other goals such as convenience, preference, taste, and the other things like that. And for every one of these steps you climb, there's a premium you have to pay. There's an added cost to it. So when we talk about the cost of a healthy diet, we just talked about what a healthy diet is. You to measure the cost of a healthy diet using the methods that have been developed by the Food Price for Nutrition Project, you have three key things that you need. You need the healthy diet standard. So what standard are you comparing the diet to? Then you need food composition data. And the reason why you need food composition data is that this data will help tell you what quantity, will help you determine the quantity of each food item you need to procure if that food item is going to be part of your healthy diet basket. And this is because the healthy diet standard, you like I already mentioned, is you need to meet the calorie minimum calorie intake and some other criteria based on food-based dietary guidelines. And so with the food composition table, it's able to tell you that, okay, for this item, maybe rice, this is how much energy is in this quantity of rice. So if you want to meet this amount of energy from rice, then you need to consume this amount. And it also gives you the edible portion, because when we are calculating the cost of a healthy diet, we have to account for the portion of the of food items that are either not consumed, so you discard them during processing or preparation, or the portion that is not used by the body. So fiber, for instance, will not count for the energy. And so the calorie content takes and the edible portion content takes care of these two things, and allows you to ensure that the quantity of the food item you calculate is really the amount that will give you everything you need to meet the healthy diet standard. And then you need retail food prices. Retail because we are looking at what it costs consumers to consume a healthy diet, and they buy at retail prices. And that price, those retail food prices, is what you use to determine the quantity, the price of the quantity of the said food item that you're going to need. Okay, so maybe I should have shown this slide first. So if you look at the healthy diet basket, it's made up of 11 items and it adds up to 2,300 kilocalories. And in this basket, you have one item from the oil and fat food group, one item from legumes, nuts, and seeds, two items from starchy staples, two items from fruits, three items from vegetables, and two items from animal source foods. And when you look at this basket is intended to be consumed over the course of a day. It's not for a meal. It's the cost of a healthy diet is a daily cost. And so for Nigeria, we use this global healthy diet basket because we don't have our own quantitative food-based dietary guidance yet. We're working on it. The country is working on it, but it's not available yet. So we use the global healthy diet basket, and these are the standards set by this basket, and it's based on sort of like an aggregation of food-based dietary guidelines from countries across the world. And then for the food composition table we use in Nigeria, we have largely used the USDA database because it's the most comprehensive of all food composition databases. It has the highest number of foods and different preparation methods and all of that. But there have been instances where maybe we have a local food item that is not in the USDA database, in which we rely on the West African food composition table as well as Nigerian food composition table. In recent years, the Nigeria food composition table has expanded with data that was updated during the 2021 National Food Consumption and Micronutrients Survey. And then for food prices, we use the National Bureau of Statistics retail food prices that are collected from over 10,000 markets monthly. And NBS, it's their routine data, is what is used to calculate the consumer price index and inflation statistics every month. And so we also use this for the cost of healthy diets. And the data is representative of rural and urban areas in all 36 states of Nigeria, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. So in terms of what we have found out based on this, the analysis, so we found out that healthy diets are becoming increasingly expensive in Nigeria. So the National Bureau of Statistics started to monitor the cost of healthy diets monthly from October 2023. But in addition to that, they provided the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition and the Food Prices for Nutrition Project data from January 2016 to right now. We have data up to December 2025, and we've been able to look at how the cost of a healthy diet has changed over time in Nigeria. And you'll see that in 2016, the average cost of a healthy diet per day was just 221 naira, but the average for 2025 was 1,444 naira. And this graph here shows you how different events in Nigeria, particularly from that point. In this graph, you'll see that the cost started to rise sharply from 2020. Prior to 2020, the costs were relatively stable and didn't change much. But from 2020, the cost started to rise. And what we found out is that inflation does not fully account for the rise in the cost of healthy diets. Because if you look at the January 2016 to March 2020 data, for instance, overall inflation in Nigeria increased. Well, like I already mentioned, the cost of healthy diet was pretty much it didn't change much. And then we also looked at the cost of healthy diet based on all food groups. So the cost of healthy diets, by definition, is based on the least cost items, and I'll talk more about this as we go on. But if you look at it based on all the food groups, you'll find out that from up to that 2020, things generally were not changing much. But from 2020 March to August 2023, the cost of healthy diets started to rise in parallel with overall inflation. And that coincided with the COVID-19 outbreak in March 2020. And then when you look at other events that happened in Nigeria, for instance, about June, July 2023, we had the in 2022 first, we had the CBN banknote policy where they were phasing out some Naira notes and wanted everybody to move to new Naira notes, and that's created a challenge for people. And then you have June, July 2023 when fuel subsidy was removed and the currency was officially devaluated. And you can see that the cost of healthy diet really rose sharply during those periods and started to rise sharply after that. So after that, the cost of healthy diets started to rise much faster than overall inflation. So what this is saying is that the least cost of a healthy diet, that's a healthy diet based on the cheapest foods, pretty much the cost increased faster than the cost of all other foods or goods and services in general. And now when we look at affordability, you will find out that in Nigeria, most Nigerians cannot afford a healthy diet. In 2018-2019, 41% of Nigerians could not afford a healthy diet. And at that time, the annual average was 264 naira per person per day. And this ranged from 5% who could not afford the healthy diet in Lagos to 87% who could not afford the healthy diet in Sokoto. And you will see that, yes, there's a lot of more states that could not afford a healthy diet in northern states. But you can see there are pockets of southern states. This is Ebonyi, Enugu, where the unaffordability of healthy diets are also significant. And if you look at now what we have in 2025, where it's 144 naira, 444 naira per person per day, it means that a single adult without any dependents will require 43,320 naira per month to afford a healthy diet. Now, if you cast your mind back to that video that was played from MBS at the beginning of this webinar, you recall that the cost of healthy diet is the least costs you can use, but it's also the cost of the raw food. It does not include the cost of processing, cooking, and going to the market to buy the food. It also doesn't include the like other costs. So if this 43,320 is just the cost of that raw food. So other things, by the time you calculate how much is needed for non-food needs, such as accommodation, shelter, clothing, and other things, education, health, you realize that for many Nigerians, based on the data we have about income and wages, it's not affordable. We only have data for 2018-19 because the official expenditure data we have for Nigeria that we use to calculate income, or as we use as a measure of income, is only available up to 2018-19 currently. We're exploring other data that we can use to have a better sense of more recent affordability data using national data. But in the 2025 State of Food Insecurity in the World report, it was estimated that 79% of Nigerians, that's more than 184 million people, could not afford a healthy diet in 2024. Now, we've talked about the cost of a healthy diet. It's the least cost. So let's now look at what is selected in this least cost. I'm sure that there are many Nigerians that may be thinking, I mean, that's the reaction we often get when we present these numbers, like, oh, the numbers are too low. I don't believe the numbers. How can it be this low? Because people look at how much they actually spend on food. But what I have here on this slide are the items that are commonly selected in the least cost healthy diet basket. So for when you look at animal source foods, you have industrial fresh milk and crayfish and local fresh milk, which has not been processed at all. They're the most frequently selected as the least cost items. For starchy staples, you have millets, white maize, and yellow maize. For vegetables, you have dried okra, dried baobab leaves, and bitter leaf. For fruits, you have avocado, date palm, and pawpaw. For oils and fats, you have palm oil, vegetable oil, and groundnut oil. For legumes, nuts, and seeds, you have shelled groundnuts. Sorry, this should be 34%, not 934. That's an error. So 34%. You have soya beans, and you have shelled melon seeds, the one that has the shell removed. But this basket, if you look at this basket and you're Nigerian, try to make a meal from this and you realize that it doesn't reflect the culinary practices and meal preferences of many Nigerians. For instance, people like to make the stew or the sauce, which will require onions and tomatoes and bell peppers and all of that. All of that is not included in the least cost of a healthy diet. It's like the basic, cheapest cost you can get. But that makes purchase of the least cost items challenging because it means that if people were going to say, okay, I'm going to use my income to purchase a healthy diet using the least cost diet, it will require significant behavioral change. And the point of this indicator is not even so much to focus on behavioral change, but to show how much unaffordability is a barrier to people achieving healthy diets. So now, if you look at the preferred food items that people like to eat for animal source foods, based on the percentage of households that purchase this, and this is 2024 data, You have dried fish, you have beef, and you have milk powder. You remember that the least cost, it was fresh milk, but here you have milk powder. And then if you look at starchy staples, it's rice, it's bread, and it's white gari. And then for vegetables, it's onions, tomatoes, and fresh okra, not the dried okra that came up as cheapest. For fruits, you have orange, you have bananas, and you have pawpaw. And then for the legumes, you have white beans, shell groundnut, and brown beans. So the oils and fats is the only group where the least cost items and the preferred items align. Then for the legumes, nuts, and seeds, and for the fruits, you have one item each. So you have groundnut aligning and you have pawpaw aligning. Otherwise, the least cost healthy diets really doesn't reflect the preferred diet of Nigerians. And when you look at the cost of healthy diets, what drives the cost the most are the nutrient-dense foods. So food and vegetables combined usually cost between 25% and 30% of the cost of a healthy diet based on the data we have over time. When you look at animal source foods, they typically cost 30% to 38% of the healthy diet baskets. And once you pick these three food groups and you add the legume, nuts, and seeds, which is also a nutrient-dense food group, you already have 70% of the cost of the healthy diet. So oils and fats and starchy staples contribute just 30% of the cost of healthy diet, even though a significant bulk of calories come from these food groups. Now, this is the same image I had shown earlier, the same illustration. If you look at this illustration, which choice is cheaper for this individual? The instant noodles with boiled egg and a soft drink, or rice and beans with vegetables, boiled egg, apple, and milk? Please drop your answers in the chat box. Based on what you know about food prices, which will be cheaper for this person? Noodles. I mean, it's noodles. At the University of Ibadan, when I teach, I say, okay, particularly when I teach master students of 400 level students, I say, okay, you're your final year. How many of you are meeting the recommendations for fruits and vegetables? If you're hungry now and somebody offered you a pack of instant noodles or an apple, and I'm not sure, I think at this point, a pack of instant noodles is actually cheaper than an apple in Nigeria, if I remember correctly. Now, I don't buy instant noodles, so I don't know the cost right now, but the last I remembered, it was cheaper. If you're hungry, yes, an apple is more nutritious, but it's also very expensive. And it's, how do you say, it's not going to fill you up and all of that. And so you have people making choices based on food prices. They know that this is nutritious. They know that, yes, this is what I need to live a healthy life and all of that, but they just cannot afford it. And even if I put an orange, not an apple, which is one of the more preferred, or I'd use the pawpaw, which is the least cost healthy diets. This basket of the healthy plates with the healthy diets is still going to be cheaper, a lot more pricey than the instant noodles and the boiled egg and the soft drink. And so this is the challenge we have. Food prices determine what people eat. When prices rise, diet quality is often the first thing that households will sacrifice. If you have to choose between keeping your family alive so that you can do better, hopefully things improve and you're able to feed them better in future, you will keep them alive rather than feeding them a healthy diet when it means that they're going to have food for fewer days. And so healthy diets are determined not only by what people choose to eat, not just by knowledge, not just by preferences, but also by what the food systems make available. Now, cost and affordability of healthy diets varies widely across states in Nigeria. So this is data from a cost of healthy diet bulletin by the National Bureau of Statistics, and is looking at the cost of healthy diets state averages in July 2025. In Bayelsa, a state in the south part of the country, the cost of a healthy diet was 2,014 naira per person per day. But in Kaduna, in the northwest, it was the cheapest and it was 819, less than half of what it was in Bayelsa. And you have other states ranging in between this. And so what you see generally in terms of patterns is that food costs are significantly higher in southern states than in northern states. You also see that even though the southeast and the southwest are close to north central states, the north central states typically have lower costs, especially for vegetables and animal source foods. So what this tells us is that there's a need for improved preservation and distribution across the country. If you're having some states experiencing more than 2 times the cost of a healthy diet within the same country, then you can see that yes, there's something needs to be done somewhere. And for those of you who are not Nigeria, so this is Kaduna, where the cost of the healthy diets was cheapest, and this is Bayelsa at the bottom, where it was most expensive. And if you look at other data, you find out that even between rural and urban areas within the same states, there are often wide price differentials within for food items. The price differentials are often large enough that you don't have the same basket. So when you look at the least cost healthy diets in the rural area of one state and the least cost healthy diet in the urban area of the same states, they are often different because food prices are so different between rural and urban areas. And so these two maps are just showing the number of months that avocado was available in urban areas and in rural areas across different states in Nigeria in 2024. And you find out that for avocados particularly, they were more unavailable in the rural than in the urban areas, showing again issues related to preservation, distribution, and because I mean you produce food in the rural areas, so if the urban areas are have the item more available, then it means that there's some trade dynamics going on that need to be better understood. Then you have differences. I mean, this is similar to what I mentioned on the previous slide for avocado, but this is showing this graph is one is for guava here and one is for avocado again. And this here is not showing the number of months that it was unavailable, but it's showing the price differences between rural and urban area in each state. And again, you see that there's often significant differences. And the example of Kwara is put here where avocados were more expensive in urban areas than in rural areas, but guava cost nearly the same in both rural and urban areas. So we have this variation. These are just two food items. Imagine looking at it over the entire list of food items in the basket. And again, even though the cost and affordability of health diets, they vary widely across the states. I mentioned this. I mentioned that its unaffordability is higher in the north than in the south, but you find out that prices are cheaper in the north than in the south. And so first of all, where you live shapes what you can afford to eat. But the dynamics of how do you say, the dynamics of affordability is based not just on costs, but it's also based on income. And I'll talk more about that, but I just want to show you this graph. So this graph is showing, it compares the cost of healthy diet. This is 2018-2019 data with the food expenditure per adult equivalent. And what you will find out is that this red line shows where it is one. One means the amount of money that households are spending on food on the average is the same as the cost of healthy diets per day. So food expenditure per day is equal to cost of a healthy diet. And where you have food expenditure per day greater than the cost of less than cost of a healthy diet. So where cost of a healthy diet is higher, it generally means the household will not be able to afford it because it's beyond what is their food budget. And what you can see here is that you have several states, many of them in the south, but you also have states like Abuja, Katsina, Benue, Kwara, Kano that are in the north. And what you see is that there are states where the cost of a healthy diet is lower than their food budgets. And so in these states, knowledge can be effective. When healthy diets are not affordable, knowledge alone will not be effective. If you tell somebody that, look, you have to eat this way or it's going to have adverse consequences, and the person cannot afford it, there's nothing the person is going to do. Unless something changes about the affordability, the knowledge is not going to change the person's behavior because the person just cannot afford to buy a healthy diet. And so in states where majority of the households spend more on food than the average cost of healthy diet, you can improve knowledge and do behavioral change interventions and see it have an effect on diet quality. But in other states, it's highly likely that you're not going to make any difference. So I just wanted to point out again here that for states so these three states I circled, Oyo, Abuja, and Ogun, they were in that top half where the food budget is higher than the cost of a healthy diet. But if you look at their consumption of fruits, this is percent of women who consume fruits in 2018. It was less than 30% in all of the states. So for these states, you can look at it and say, it means if these states were able to switch their what they purchase more to align with the healthy diet baskets the least cost healthy diet baskets, they will be consuming a healthy diet, which means they will consume fruits. But then you have preferences that will still be a limiting factor because, like we saw, it's only pawpaw that was selected in one of the least cost items that was commonly selected and is also a preferred item. And even in the least cost selection, it was only selected 8% of the time. So it's selection as a least cost, that just means that it's not always a least cost item. And then when you talk about unaffordability, I talked about how costs are lower in the north, but unaffordability is higher. And that's because unaffordability is a function of both the costs and the income. So high costs can lead to unaffordability, low incomes can lead to unaffordability. A combination of high costs and low incomes can also lead to unaffordability. For instance, if you look at the case of Ebonyi in the southeast, that southern states that I had shown, what you see is that for Ebonyi has high cost of healthy diet like other southeast states. But unlike other southeast states, their incomes are relatively a lot lower. And so unaffordability of a healthy diet is really high. For many northern states, the costs are low, but their incomes are much, much lower than the national average. And so unaffordability is also high. And what we've seen with Nigeria is that food producers are most susceptible to unaffordability of healthy diets and to low incomes. This graph here shows you the percent of males in farm employment. And because Nigeria is still largely a patriarchal society, the male employment determines a lot household food security and food access and ability to achieve a healthy diet. And what you see here is when you correlate it with the poverty rates, there's a high correlation. So states that have a higher percent of males in farm employment, which are mostly the northern states, also tend to have a high prevalence of poverty. So correlation doesn't mean causation, but it's when we first of all looked at this graph as part of work on the food systems dashboard, it's made us start to think more about the data and we explore the data in other ways. So when you look at the percent, if you compare farming household with non-farming households, and with farming households, we mean the households where crop production is the main source of income. One of the things you realize is that non-farming households have lower unaffordability of healthy diets. So whereas 57% of farming households could not afford a healthy diet, it's just 27% of non-farming households. So 27% is still considerable, but it's a lot less than 57%. It's less than half of the prevalence among farming households. And you can see that the patterns are the same or similar with the national poverty line. Now, what this means for food systems transformation actions. So the evidence we have and the data we have is that when food prices are high, then there's a need to improve the supply of nutritious foods. But when you have low incomes, improving the supply is not necessarily going to do anything. Like you see in the case of northern Nigeria, cost may be low and people are still not able to afford it because their incomes are too low. So in this case, you also need to improve livelihoods. And where people's livelihoods are the people who are engaged in farm employment, then it means their livelihoods are also tied to food systems. And so you need to improve food systems so that their livelihoods improve. And you can also have social protection. So social protection will provide a buffer, so either a cash transfer or a food basket or other thing to help the household mates and acquire all the foods they need for healthy diets. And then in the case of displacement, so like the example of those 3 states where a low percent of women were consuming fruits, but the data shows that within the same time period, their food budget was higher than the least cost of a healthy diet. That's displacement. That means cheap cost nutritious diets are being displaced by higher cost, more expensive food items. And so this group will benefit from behavior change interventions. I'll just keep that slide. So to talk about more of the food systems interventions, it's to highlight the fact that if you say, okay, to improve cost of healthy diets, you can't just say, oh, we are going to reduce prices, because like we just talked about, food producers they are seriously affected by unaffordability of healthy diet. And so if you reduce food prices, you are going to harm food producers because food prices determine their incomes. And so that will make their unaffordability worse. But if you say, oh, let's increase incomes, you also have to increase incomes, like you have to care for increase incomes. I mean, nutrition is not an economist, so I can't tell you how you do it, but the economists, have these models and ways you can address this to ensure that increasing incomes does not cause inflation, which means prices rise and then unaffordability increases. And what we know is that data systems are critical for action. So Kofi Annan said that, and he said this about nutrition, that it is crucial to invest in data because data gaps undermine our ability to target resources, develop policies, and track accountability. Without good data, we are flying blind. If you can't see it, you can't solve it. And in addition, we know that what gets measured also gets prioritized. So we've seen that in the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria monitors the cost of healthy diets monthly. But we also have the Nigeria Food Systems Dashboard. And both of these things were highlighted in that video that was played at the beginning of the webinar. The dashboard reports on expanded indicators, but only annually, but allows us to have a sense, like when you are looking at it month on month, you may not see the big picture of how things are changing. But when you look at annual, the data complement each other. But we can't use only the cost of healthy diet indicators to make these decisions. We need better data about production. We need data about trade, transport, logistic costs. That gap between Bayelsa and Kaduna, why is that costs what is it possible to reduce that cost? Is it that the food preferences are so different that people in Bayelsa eat something really, really higher than the least cost healthy diet in their environment? We need to look at that makes the least cost healthy diets in a place like Kaduna not sold in Bayelsa because their tastes are so different, so they don't sell those items. We don't know. We need more data to be able to increase our diagnosis, our decisions, and actions on affordability of healthy diets. But what we do know already is that we need to improve trade, we need to improve food production, we need to improve the distribution logistics and also infrastructure. Also, one of the key things I did mention, but I alluded to it when I showed you the basket, that the least cost healthy diet is fresh milk, but the preferred diet is dry milk, powder milk. Storage, cold storage, and other infrastructure related facilities are key reasons why fresh milk may be the least cost, but it's not what people buy in Nigeria, because the logistics of buying and storing fresh milk is such a challenge, particularly when you take into account food safety issues. And then my ANA Science Policy Fellowship is actually looking to answer some of these questions. So digging deeper into the available data we have, particularly to identify solutions that would work to improve affordability among food producers. And so we are working on a literature review to identify potential solutions. Then we're doing a potential to benefit analysis using data in Nigeria to say, okay, these solutions based on the status quo in Nigeria, will implementing these solutions that have been done elsewhere really give us the change we want? And then we'll look at, okay, even if these solutions will give us the change, is it likely to be feasible and effective in the country, given the contextual environment? And so we hope to have policy recommendations by Q3 of 2026 to better help with increasing affordability of healthy diets, especially targeting food producers. There wasn't enough time, so I couldn't share maybe some of what we may be seeing already. So to go back to the slide I had at the beginning, can Nigerians afford to eat healthy? So the audience, with the contribution, you give 3 answers, and with the data, it's the 3 answers. So it is yes for some people, they can afford to eat healthy, but they may not necessarily be eating healthy. It's no for many of the population. Many of the population are not able to afford a healthy diet. So it depends on what foods are being sold around you, what foods your environment has conditioned you to believe you should consume, so as influence your preferences, and then what you are able to afford to purchase or to procure for your household. So knowledge alone cannot improve diet quality and nutrition in Nigeria. Sadly for us as nutritionists, we need to work with other stakeholders. We need to support food systems transformation and really make sure that we are collaborating across a variety of sectors that influence food systems to make healthy diets more affordable for people. So the key takeaways: healthy diets remain unaffordable for many Nigerians. Nutrient-dense foods drive costs, especially fruits, vegetables, and animal source foods. And we need food systems transformation to improve affordability. And so at my acknowledgements, we can't thank Stokes University and Food Prices for Nutrition Project enough. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is where I have been, where I'm working on my Science Policy Fellowship. And the ministry, the reason why I applied for the fellowship in the first place was because the ministry, healthy diets are not affordable. What should we do to answer that question better without stammering? And then, of course, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. We've been working on this. I've been working on this with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition since January 2019. We started discussions in 2018 and we started working on it in 2019. So it's been a long time. Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, and Department of Human Nutrition at the University of Ibadan. So even though it was at the back of my mind, I was interested in how food prices, basically food security, influences diet quality. I started to dig deep into this, and it was what influenced my attending a webinar by the Food Price for Nutrition Project during one of the ANH Academy conferences in 2018. A student of mine at the University of Ibadan said, oh, she didn't want to do anything else for her project except to work on the cost of diet and how that influences nutrition and dietary intake. And so I said, okay, I haven't done work on this really before. And so I started to dig deep and started to look for resources. And then I got into this, and it's been going to 8 years. And I think we still have a long way to go to get where we want. But thank you very much, and happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olutayo Adeyemi. That was a very profound and really, really insightful conversation. I have many key takeaways, but my major one is that knowledge alone doesn't improve this increase in healthy diets. We need to look at it with the data present for cost of healthy diet. Thank you so much. I'll be handing over to my colleague here today, Olarewaju, who is going to help with the question and answer. Some questions are already in the chat box, and people will be allowed to ask the question as well. Over to you here today. Thank you.
And let me re-echo our thanks to Dr. Olutayo for the amazing presentation, very insightful. I think that the conversation around the cost of healthy diet is here to stay, because we'll have to continue to review until we are sure that all Nigerians can actually afford healthy diets. All right, so we have some questions already in the chat, and I'll just read them out. Maybe what we can do because of time, I'll just take 2 questions. Dr. Olutayo, you can respond, and then I'll take the next 2 questions so that way we're able to maximize our time. So the first question while you were taking your presentation was, are you also working with the Planetary Health Diet by Eat Lancet? I guess that should be referring to the statistics and some of the information that you gave us during your presentation. And then another person asked, noodles not healthy due to high sodium content. Is that right? So you could take that, the first 2 questions, and then I'll come back with other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, you recall that I had talked about when you look at the cost of a healthy diet, to calculate the cost of a healthy diet, you need a healthy diet standard, you need the food composition table, and you need the food prices. So the Lancet Planetary Health Standard is a healthy diet standard that you could use. But for this work, we didn't use the Lancet planetary standards. So typically, countries would use their own country food-based dietary guidelines that have been developed based on their context, based on nutrient requirements, physical activity for the population, and other things, and their dietary patterns, the kinds of foods that are available and are most consumed. But Nigeria does not have those quantitative guidelines yet. So we use the Global Healthy Diet Basket, which was developed for countries that don't have food-based dietary guidelines to be able to calculate the cost of a healthy diet. So even though the Lancet standards can be used, we haven't used it. On one of the slides, I shared links to the Food Prices for Nutrition websites. You can also search for it online. You'll find the website if you just search for Food Prices for Nutrition website. They have tools there that you can upload your price data to and use it to calculate the cost of a healthy diet. And one of the food-based dietary guidelines that they load in their templates is actually the Lancet Planetary Health Guidelines. So you could also use that if you wanted to do that. Then regarding noodles, yes, noodles is not healthy. So I use the image of the noodles because it's Nigeria is one of the countries that consumes that is the highest consumers of instant noodles globally. And nutritionists talk a lot about it. But I was using it as an illustration to show that on one hand, you have a meal that meets healthy diet standards. On the other hand, you have unhealthy meal because you also have a soda, the soft drink, which is also unhealthy. And the only thing that was healthy in the plate on the left on that image was the boiled egg. But when you look at cost and affordability of healthy diets, when we say people should, this is what you should be eating, one of the reasons why people are eating what we don't want them to eat is because that is what they can afford, because the healthy diet is expensive.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lutayo. Let me take the next two questions. It says, these are very important information provided here. Well done. However, I'm not sure we should be comparing apples with noodles as a typical fruit in our diet, as we have a number of less expensive traditional fruits. Is apple not elitist and imported? That's question one. Then question two, do we have a general idea of what a healthy diet means? Those are the next questions.
Thank you very much. So I did mention that, yes, that, okay, apple was probably not a good thing. I mean, ChatGPT generated that image for me. I should have told it to put some maybe oranges or avocado. So yes, apple is elitist in Nigeria. It's expensive, but I did mention that even if we had changed that item to pawpaw or avocado or date palm, which were the fruits that come up as the least costs common most frequently as least cost in Nigeria, that plate of healthy diet was still not going to be affordable. Remember that the least cost healthy diets data that I showed you, those numbers I was showing, it wasn't based on that plate. It was based on the food items I showed you when they select avocado and date palm, that's dates for fruits, or pawpaw and other items, but those are the most frequently selected. Select millet for starchy staples, select crayfish and fresh milk for animal source and all of that. Those were the items that come up as the least costs in local foods if you want to meet a healthy diet. So yes, that illustration was just to show you let me say a young person's or a convenient healthy diet, so to say, because the other thing you have to consider is that eating an apple is a lot more convenient than eating many of our local foods. But yes, it wasn't meant to be reflective. It was just showing, illustrating that a plate of nutritious foods with is a lot more expensive than if you were just to eat instant noodles. Regarding what a healthy diet means, yes, we know what a healthy diet means to a large extent. The years of research has shown us what constitutes a healthy diet, and it is on the basis of what a healthy diet is that food-based dietary guidelines have been developed by different countries. And it's also on that basis that the healthy diet baskets, the global healthy diet baskets that we use to calculate the least cost healthy diet was developed. So we know, and research has even been done to show that the healthy diet basket does reflect diets that meet energy requirements and nutrients adequacy. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I hope we're all taking notes. The next two questions. Thank you, Dr. Lutayo. During the estimation of the cost of healthy diet, was seasonality and regional availability of food groups considered? Did you get that?
Yes. Seasonality.
Okay, yes, all right. So the second question, Kafsan is excited that we are now looking at the details of healthy diet, as this is a consumer right. What is the way forward then for every consumer to have access to and be able to afford a healthy diet?
Okay, so regarding the first question about the regions or the zone states and the seasonality, so the data we use is the data from NBS. NBS collects food price data every single month. So we have month-on-month data for 10 years now. And so the numbers I presented to you are the annual averages, but those annual averages include months where prices are exceptionally high, as well as months where prices are exceptionally high and months where prices are low. And the data is collected for rural and urban for all 36 states in Nigeria, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. So you have 74 locations, 37 times 2 rural urban every month that this data is available for. And the cost of healthy diet is actually calculated for rural urban every month as well. So it's not just one number for the states. We have both numbers for the states, even where we report one number. So the numbers do take into account seasonality. They take into account state differences. And we are doing further work to see if there are any cyclical patterns. So maybe we know that sometimes the food, some foods become more expensive, but at the same time, other foods are also becoming cheaper. So does that significantly affect the cost of a healthy diet, or the basket just changes and the costs remain fairly the same? So those are some of the additional work we are doing using the data. The second question was on what the way forward is for the consumer. So when healthy diets are not affordable, there's very little that consumers can do. It becomes a policy action because you need to either reduce prices or you increase incomes. And I've told you how both of them need to be handled with care, because if you reduce prices, some people depend on prices for their income as well. But we know that there are efficiencies. Our food system is very inefficient. There's a lot of food waste. And so it's possible that without reducing that, if we just took care of better processing and preservation and infrastructure, we may be able to raise farmer incomes without and we may be able to reduce food prices as well as raise farmer incomes at the same time. This is something we don't know yet. So we are looking at available data. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN is also they're starting to do a lot more work around this. And I know that they're going to be doing some modeling very soon around this to help us answer this question. So what can consumers do in the short term? In the short term, you could look to consume food items that are more least cost. So for instance, you have to do away with rice in your diet. If you wanted to consume a least cost healthy diet, you pretty much, if you're low income earner, you pretty much cannot eat rice at all, because it throws off that food budget for the month or for the day. So things also, you may not be able to eat beef as an animal source food. You have to go with the cheaper items on that basket. And if you live in a place where the conditions allow, where it won't be more costly for you, you could actually also look into growing some of your fruits and vegetables. If you're able to consistently grow some of your fruits and vegetables, even if it's just for part of the year, then the budgets that would have gone to fruits and vegetables, you are able to deploy it to other food groups, and that helps you to meet the cost of healthy diets. But largely, it's not a decision it's not an action for consumers to take. It's the system, it's the policies that need to improve food environment so people can make can afford and make better choices.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tayo. We have just 10 minutes more for this session. And I see that we have Joshua Ishola's hands up. So please, Joshua, after the next two questions, we'll have you take your questions. So please be patient. Thank you. So the next two questions. Hi, Dr. Tayo. Thank you for your presentation. I'm curious to know, have you tried to find the reasons why rural areas cannot afford healthy diets compared to the urban areas? A good example is what you presented for avocado. What could be the issue? Is it that rural population produce these food items for commercial purpose? Then the second question, please, how best can healthy diets be conceptualized and measured in a nutrition security study by a researcher who is not a core nutritionist?
Okay, thank you very much. So for the first question, so really the dynamics vary. So some food items, avocado, I don't have enough information to know whether we produce all our avocados. If we're importing some avocado and Nigeria is still very food imports dependent, then it's going to be cheaper in the urban areas because the logistics of distribution to urban areas are lower than the logistics of distribution to rural areas. There's also the issue the person was question already raised. A lot of people in rural areas produce foods to make an income, and so they don't necessarily keep out to consume. And that raises the issue of infrastructure. When rural areas, when they produce, if they don't have the infrastructure to store and keep back some that will last them for the entire year, then what happens is that they are going to sell everything right after harvest, and then the rest of the year, so maybe for like 3 months or 4 months, they'll have access, and then the rest of the year it's expensive because then they have to bring it from markets that may be far away. So it's several factors related to low incomes, related to trade, and because of logistics and access to some of the rural areas. Regarding the question about how a non-nutritionist can measure the cost of a healthy diet, the Food Prices for Nutrition project has made it very easy. There are tools, there's syntax, I think there's data syntax, I'm not sure if there's R, but there are also Excel workbooks and guidance notes that guide you. You have your food price data, you have this different data, and you just upload it into this template, and it calculates the cost of a healthy diet for you. So if you go to the Food Prices for Nutrition website, you'll be able to access these tools and resources and be able to do it for your study, even if you don't have the statistical skills to run the analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Tayo. Joshua Ishola, please, you have the floor now.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Food. That's very insightful, presentation. Yeah, I'm a food pricing manager, and I stay in Abuja. I find the evidences you've shown, using data and all of that regarding the cost of healthy diet very interesting. But however, considering the persistent, supply chain, challenges that we actually have in Nigeria, such as, post-harvest losses, inadequate storage, and also high transportation costs. So I think it actually raises, a concern for me. So, given, all of these, structural constraints. So my question is, how realistic is it to achieve affordable, healthy diets in Nigeria under this current supply chain, conditions? And of course, what do you think are the practical steps that can be taken to address, some of these bottlenecks while keeping prices, low for consumers? Thank you.
Should I go ahead now, or?
Yes, I think you can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I think in some of what we've said, private sector is for sure very key, because when you look at the cost of logistics and distribution and all of that, those costs are private sector costs. It's not in the public space. But you've mentioned it. We need better infrastructure. We need to improve our infrastructure. We need to improve our information sharing, because in some instances it's this distortion, there's or delay in transmitting price information, so people don't know that, oh, we can actually procure this thing at a cheaper price from this location and all of that. So it's several factors, and it will require different stakeholders working together. Again, many of us, we work in silos, we don't talk to each other. This particular project has been very collaborative because the methods were developed by nutritionists and economists, but we need other stakeholders to also step to the plate. The methods were developed through research, but we now need people who are implementing programs, policymakers, private sector, civil society, to start to use the findings to inform how they run their businesses and implement their programs.
Thank you very much, Dr. T. So I'll take 2 more questions from the chat box, and then we'll come back to another person that has their hands raised, so that it's not just my voice you're hearing asking all the questions. That was very educative, Dr. Lutayo. Thanks a lot. Social media has a way of influencing cost of some foods. Once a particular food item begins to make a headway on social media of it being healthy and affordable, it begins to increase in cost. Have you considered the effect of social media on food choices and cost? Then the second question, what is the difference between healthy diet, balanced diet, and adequate meal? Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So for the first question, so yes, we know that if you say, oh, these are least cost items and you increase the demand for particular items, yes, increased demand usually leads to increased prices. But so this is why I said we need to have data-driven solutions. There are other countries that have been able to address these issues. We're not the first country that is grappling with this. How did they do it? How were they able to keep prices manageable even when demand increased? The other thing you know is that no matter how highly demanded something is, if supply is high, the prices remain stable even when there's high demand. For instance, in tomato and pepper season in Nigeria, we demand tomatoes a lot, but prices really drop and are cheap then because the supply exceeds the demand. How can we leverage on economics to ensure that we are able to keep prices at a level that are affordable for more people? So regardless of whether it's being promoted on social media or not. The other thing you will find out is that some foods, naturally, even if you promote it on social media, the people who are on social media are the more elites, the richer percent of the population. If you look at the statistics, the poor people, they don't use smartphones. They just use phones that are not smart. They don't have regular access to internet and all of that. So even though you say the food, and then there are some foods that the elite people, no matter how much you promote it, the chances that they will consume it is not very likely. If you tell someone that can afford meat now, say, no, don't eat meat, eat crayfish. I mean, they'll use crayfish for some meals, but it's not going to be what they rely on for their animal source food. So it's looking at the data around food preferences, it's looking at data around willingness to pay, it's looking at data around social desirability of different foods, and harnessing all of this to ensure that we make healthy diets available for everybody. The second one, I can't remember.
That's the difference between healthy diet, balanced diet, and adequate meal.
Some of it is so first of all, adequate meal. A meal is what you eat at one sitting. A diet is is reflective of the entire pattern of the meals you eat. You cannot determine someone's diet from one meal, what the person is eating as a sitting, because you look at diet over what the person eats over the course of a day and over several days, not even one day, because a day may have issues that make the regular diets challenging. And then when you talk about balanced diet is an old term that nutritionists used to use, but we phased out that term and we now use adequate diet because we realized that balanced talks about the proportion of food in relation to each other. It doesn't necessarily mean that any one proportion is sufficient for your nutrient requirements. So balance talks about proportion. So adequate talks about it's both the proportion of food to each other, is both the amount of individual food groups, whether or not it means your requirements for a healthy diet. So we use adequate diets now, no balanced diets.
All right, thank you, Dr. T. And the last question for the day, Adeola Adeabu, please 2 seconds, ask your question so that we can wrap up this session. Thank you. Adeola, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor, for the very insightful presentation. So I actually asked the question about conceptualizing healthy diet earlier. That question around not being a core nutritionist and you still want to measure healthy diet. So I'm currently on a study and I planned using FCN. I don't know if you are familiar with that, ma. That's food consumption score nutrition.
Sorry. Sorry, just so that we don't take time, if this is a specific question about research you are doing,
Okay,
drop your
ma.
email for me in the chat box.
All right, I will do that right away, ma.
Then
Yes.
I'll just and then I'll send you email and you can
All right,
have
thank you.
that offline.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Thank you for saving that. I was just going to suggest the same thing. So I'll hand it over back to Miracle. Thank you for having me. And thank you once again, Dr. Lutayo.
Thank
Sorry,
you so
good
much.
afternoon.
I'll
My hand has
be
been up.
Apologies, sir. We'll not be able to take any more questions, but you can drop your questions in the chat and we'll send it to Dr. Lutayo and we'll get the response across to you. Or you can drop your email as well, and then she will get across to you with the response to your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yetunde. Thank you so much, Dr. Tayo. And on that note, we've come to the close of today's knowledge sharing session. We are very grateful to Dr. Olutayo Adeyemi for sharing her expertise, insights, and invaluable work that she has done on the cost and affordability of healthy diets in Nigeria. We trust that today's session has been impactful and insightful for everyone, and it would inform the work we do going forward. Please, I want everyone to note that the session materials as well as a feedback form will be shared with you after today's session. If you're unable to fill the feedback form during the session, kindly do so when it's shared. Your feedback is important to us and to help us to improve future sessions. Thank you once more for active participation and the questions. We look forward to having you join us next session. Until then, take care, everyone. Goodbye.